this video, you're going to be learning about different types of evaluation design. So let's jump right in. If you look at this slide, the first design which is commonly used is a longitudinal quasi-experimental. Now, how do you read this diagram? One is there is a participant group and a control group in pink. We are then looking at different timelines wherein we have baseline, check-in, a midterm, end of project, and even post-project. We are also looking at how the data at different, this is the timeline. So at different stages, how does the comparative and the participant group fare? So when you're looking at a quasi-experimental study, you're doing, number one, you are looking at both a comparison group as well as a participant group. You are measuring them over different points in time. So if we look at our case study, if we were to do a longitudinal quasi-experimental study, we would take students from the school who have been given computers and students who have not been given computers at the start of an academic year. We would then check in with them 6 months into the program with both the students from the comparative group as well as the participating school. We would then look at the end of the academic year, how have learning scores increased? And we will then go back maybe a year after the program and check how the comparative group or the participant group have fared. Now, many times it might happen that because of program intervention, participants are doing very well. Just at the end of the program, there has been a dip because most activities, have kind of concluded and the program is not in full force as planned, but you're still seeing higher results. But now what would also be very important to see is does the initiative sustain the impacts? And in this particular example, it doesn't seem so. So longitudinal quasi-experimental studies help us to have very rigorous evidence of, the impact and the causality of our interventions over a period of time with similar groups and checking what outcomes they see over a period of time. The next one that we look at is we still have some sort of a quasi-experimental, but it's not longitudinal. Now, longitudinal is when you're tracing over multiple time frames, whereas this one, we're just looking at a quasi-experimental design, which has both a comparison group as well as looking at it at different points in time. We then can look at the very popular and what is considered as the gold standard in evaluation is the randomized control trial. While there's immense literature, I think one of the key differences with the randomized control trial is that research subjects are randomly assigned. So looking at our example, we take two schools, to have a participant and comparative, but these two schools are not, we've not decided who's going to be the comparative and who's going to be the who's going to be the comparative and who's going to be the participant. So they're just randomly selected. So it could be that, this either school does have the probability of being in either the project or the control group. And that's the key difference. Because the reason behind this is that we are saying that they are as similar and both have equal probability. Now, in most times, this becomes difficult and we usually use a quasi-experiment because we have certain criteria for having people be part of our program. For example, a lot of times, schools, government schools, more vulnerable schools are chosen to be part of development interventions. The next one is a truncated longitudinal, which basically means you come in somewhere, you still have your comparison group, but you do not have baseline data. And, 6 months into the program, you realize, hey, I really need to track whether these computers are getting used, what's been the impact of these computers. And so you initiate a midterm study and then you do an end of project evaluation. So this is, you don't have a very, you're not starting from the beginning, but you already have created some sort of intervention and then you're going in to collect data. This is quite common. We've done this a lot of times for livelihood and skilling projects, where you have the baseline data of youth who have taken part in a skilling project, and then after 3 months of them doing the program, they've been placed and they're getting a certain a certain salary, a certain income. And then we look at youth from similar backgrounds as to what their jobs are, what their salaries are. So this is called a pre-post and a post-only comparison. To put it into perspective of our case study, you could say you have got baseline data of students where you have for the schools you have intervened, and you have end-line test scores of there. And then you just take similar student or similar schools and students from schools which have not received digital infrastructure and look at their test scores. So this is once the program's done. This does bring in difficulties on talking about program impact, because you never know what the comparative group's baseline data or baseline looked like. The next is post-test only, where you are just looking at test scores at the end of a program, or you're just looking at placements and salaries at the end of a program with a similar comparative group. This is extremely common, where you're looking at just a pre-post, no comparison, but just looking at a baseline and end of project. And of course, just a post-test, which is usually social audit, social return on investments, where you're just looking at a retrospective. So you're just taking a retrospective lens of what could have happened, and then making some sort of inferences on the reason these changes have happened, or why it's happened because of your program. So when we look at this, I'd like to take you back to, what we discussed in the earlier video, where now I guess you could put this into perspective, right? What is the purpose? Do you want to make change? Do you want to make changes during your program? Should you then adopt a longitudinal study? What kind of time frames are you just looking at? 3 months after the program? Who are you kind of answering these questions for? Who's going to read the report? When are they going to read the report? Again, coming back to, is it purposive, formative, summative? And again, what kind of resources do you have to adopt any one of these designs? So in the next video, we are going to be looking at a short quiz results. So I would ask all of you to do the quiz on evaluation design, and in the next video I will take you through why and why not the answers you had were correct or wrong. So thank you, and look forward to your responses on the quiz.